On this episode of The Pharmacy Doctor, birth control drug recall, a proposed $29+ billion merger, and genetics in medicine. And now drug therapy news for you on The Pharmacy Doctor. Welcome. We begin with the September 2011 U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) news release on the approval of Soliris, eculizumab, to treat patients with atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome, a rare and chronic blood disease that can lead to kidney failure and is also associated with increased risk of death and stroke. Atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome accounts for 5 to 10% of all cases of hemolytic uremic syndrome. The disease disproportionately affects children. Soliris is a targeted therapy that works by inhibiting proteins that play a role in the syndrome. The FDA first approved Soliris in March 2007 to treat paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, a rare type of blood disorder that can lead to disability and premature death. Soliris is classified as an orphan drug. Orphan drugs are those that demonstrate promise for the diagnosis and/or treatment of rare diseases or conditions. There are no other FDA-approved treatments for atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome, and the safety and effectiveness of current standard treatment, plasma therapy, plasma exchange, or fresh frozen plasma infusion, have not been studied in well-controlled trials. Soliris' safety and effectiveness were established in 2 single-arm trials in 37 adults and adolescent patients with atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome and 1 retrospective study in 19 pediatric patients and 11 adult patients with the same syndrome. Patients treated with Soliris in these studies experienced a favorable improvement in kidney function, including elimination of the requirement for dialysis in several patients with atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome that did not respond to plasma therapy. Patients treated with Soliris also exhibited improvement in platelet counts and other blood parameters that correlate with the syndrome disease activity. The most common side effects seen in patients treated with Soliris for atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome included high blood pressure, diarrhea, headache, anemia, vomiting, nausea, upper respiratory and urinary tract infections, and a decrease in white blood cells. The new indication for Soliris is being approved with an extension of the existing risk evaluation and mitigation strategy to inform healthcare providers and patients about the known risk of life-threatening meningococcal infections. Also this month, the FDA approved a new use for Remicade, infliximab. Previously approved for other indications, Remicade is now approved to treat ulcerative colitis in children 6 years and older who have had inadequate response to conventional therapy. Remicade reduces signs and symptoms of ulcerative colitis and induces and maintains clinical remission in these patients. Ulcerative colitis is a type of inflammatory bowel disease that affects the lining of the large intestine, the colon, and rectum. Symptoms of ulcerative colitis include abdominal pain, diarrhea, rectal bleeding, weight loss, and fever. Between 50,000 and 100,000 children in the United States have inflammatory bowel disease. Of these, 40% have ulcerative colitis. Remicade belongs to a class of drugs called tumor necrosis factor, or TNF, blockers. TNF blockers suppress the immune system by blocking the activity of TNF, a substance in the body that can cause inflammation and lead to autoimmune diseases. In addition to being approved for ulcerative colitis, Remicade is approved for the treatment of other autoimmune diseases such as Crohn's disease in adults and children 6 years and older, as well as rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, that is, arthritis affecting the joints in the spine and the pelvis, psoriatic arthritis, joint pain associated with psoriasis, and plaque psoriasis in adults. The safety and efficacy of Remicade was supported by a multi-center, randomized, open-label study in 60 children ages 6 years to 17 years with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. All had failed to respond to or tolerate conventional treatment. Remicade carries a boxed warning for risk of serious infections and cancer. Increased risks of infections include tuberculosis and infections caused by viruses, fungi, or bacteria. There have been cases of unusual cancers reported in adolescent and young adult patients using TNF blocking agents, including a rare and fatal type of cancer called hepatosplenic T-cell lymphoma. Children should have all of their vaccines brought up to date before starting treatment with Remicade and should not receive live vaccines while taking Remicade. The most common side effects of Remicade are worsening of ulcerative colitis, upper respiratory infections, infusion-related reactions, and headache. Remicade is manufactured by Janssen Biotech Incorporated in Pennsylvania. Yes, and for Remicade and all tumor necrosis factor alpha blockers, the FDA issued a drug safety communication September 7, 2011, informing healthcare professionals that the boxed warning for this entire class of medicines has been updated to include the risk of infection from two bacterial pathogens, Legionella and Listeria. Recently, FDA reviewed cases of infection in patients treated with TNF alpha blockers and recommended that healthcare professionals be aware that patients treated with TNF alpha blockers are at increased risk for developing serious infections involving multiple organ systems and sites that may lead to hospitalization or death due to bacterial, mycobacterial, such as tuberculosis, fungal, such as histoplasmosis, aspergillosis, candidiasis, coccidioidomycosis, blastomycosis, pneumocytosis, viral, such as hepatitis B, parasitic, and other opportunistic pathogens. The risks and the benefits of TNF alpha blockers should be considered prior to initiating therapy in patients with chronic or recurrent infection and patients with underlying conditions that may predispose them to infection, patients greater than 65 years old, and patients taking concomitant immunosuppressants may be at greater risk of infection. Prior to initiating TNF alpha blockers and periodically during treatment, patients should be evaluated for active tuberculosis and tested for latent infection. Patients should be monitored for signs and symptoms of serious infections while taking TNF alpha blockers. Empiric antifungal therapy should be considered in patients at risk for invasive fungal infections who develop severe systemic illness. Healthcare professionals should encourage patients to read the medication guide that accompanies their prescription for a tumor necrosis factor alpha blocker. Sometimes there may be multiple medicines in a given class of medicines. Then a new class of medicines may be marketed, which may have a different mechanism of action or chemical structure from existing medicines. The FDA reports the following new molecular entities. Often generic medicines save money over some brand name medicines. Here's a list of first-time approved generics by the FDA. In drug business news, two pharmacy benefit management companies, PBMs, seek to merge with a $29+ billion acquisition of Medco by Express Scripts. These companies provide pharmacy mail-order services. Medco also owns Accredo, a specialty pharmacy that provides biotech injection medicines, for example those used in hemophilia, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and other conditions. PBMs have relationships with pharmacies, pharmaceutical companies, and insurance companies, and may enter into government contracts, for example, Medicare Part D, TRICARE, federal employee health benefit plans. PBMs have preferred drug lists or formularies in an effort to lower drug acquisition costs. Formularies may often include generic medicines when there are multiple medicines that can be used for similar conditions. This cost savings may be passed on to the patient, or if particular brands are preferred, the patient may pay a higher cost if approved for that brand. Another example of a PBM is CVS Caremark. Retail pharmacists have expressed concerns about the merger of Express Scripts and Medco and are suspicious that the cost savings will not be passed on to retail pharmacies or to the patients. Representative owners of community pharmacies and the chief executive officers of Express Scripts and Medco Health Solutions have appeared before the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Intellectual Property, Competition, and the Internet. The Federal Trade Commission must approve the merger before it can take effect. Drug shortages are voluntarily reported to the FDA by manufacturers, healthcare professionals, and patients. Drug shortages may be caused by a manufacturing delay, increase in demand, manufacturing quality issues, delay in the manufacturer receiving raw materials and components from suppliers, or a manufacturer discontinuing drug production in favor of newer, more profitable drugs. Here are the drug shortages reported in September 2011. The FDA reports that the over-the-counter asthma inhalers containing chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, will no longer be made or sold after December 31, 2011. The FDA says users of epinephrine inhalers containing CFCs should plan now to get a prescription for a replacement product because these inhalers will not be made or sold after the end of this 2011 year. Epinephrine inhalers marketed by Armstrong Pharmaceutical Incorporated as Primatene Mist are the only FDA-approved inhalers for the temporary relief of occasional symptoms of mild asthma that are sold over the counter in retail stores without a prescription. The product uses CFCs to propel the medicine out of the inhaler so that consumers can breathe it into their lungs. However, Primatene Mist will no longer be available by year's end because no CFC containing epinephrine inhalers can be made or sold after December 31, 2011 to comply with obligations made under the Montreal Protocol on Substances that Deplete the Ozone Layer. This is an international agreement signed by the United States in which countries agreed to phase out substances that deplete the ozone layer, including CFCs, after certain dates. The FDA began public discussions about the use of CFCs in epinephrine inhalers in January 2006. The FDA finalized the phase-out date for using CFCs in these inhalers and notified the public in November 2008. Many manufacturers have changed their inhalers to replace CFCs with an environmentally friendly propellant called hydrofluoroalkane, HFA. There is currently no HFA version of epinephrine inhalers. There are, however, many other safe and effective inhalers to treat asthma symptoms. Recalls remove a product from the market and may be initiated by a firm or by the FDA. Qualitas Pharmaceuticals has a recall on multiple lots of oral contraceptives because of a packaging error. Visit the web addresses listed for additional information. And more information on oral contraceptives. From September 26, 2011, the FDA informs the public that it has not yet reached a conclusion but remains concerned about the potential increased risk of blood clots with the use of drospirenone containing birth control pills. FDA has completed its review of two 2011 studies that evaluated the risk of blood clots for women who used drospirenone containing birth control pills, previously mentioned in FDA's drug safety communication issued on May 31, 2011.